My name is Julia, and I am in the Ethnic Studies Residency program, graduate student getting my master's in curriculum and instruction as well. And being in the Ethnic Studies Residency program means that I am also in the single subject credential program for social studies.
I am currently a graduate student with the Lurie College of Education. I am receiving a single subject credential in social science with a concentration in ethnic studies.
My name is Angelica Lopez, and I am a graduate/credential student at San Jose State University. I'm currently working for a master's and a teaching credential. My concentration is social science with, I guess it would be another additional concentration of ethnic studies.
It's hard to pinpoint when I figured out that learning was like a continuation of teaching, or like in other words that like as a teacher you're always going to be a learner, and like that's something that I've always identified as is just being a learner. And so I see teaching as a way to like extend that role as a career. But I think the moment that I learned that teaching could be a form of activism was really the moment that it all kind of clicked for me. And it was the summer before I started my undergraduate program at UC San Diego that I learned about the ban of ethnic studies in Tucson, Arizona. And then it just became an overall ban in Arizona. And so just to see the activism from students and teachers and just the community in order to try to promote ethnic studies and keep it was really inspiring to me. And so that's when I first was like, oh, teaching is a form of activism. And so that's what brings me to it today.
For me, with going into education, it sort of came from working with youth and with children in the past, and then being a teaching assistant. I learned a lot about, school, how planning works, all those different things, and I continued to work in schools afterwards, and that's when I realized that I wanted to pursue a career in education.
When I was in undergrad, and this was probably my freshman year, I want to say, I was originally an art major, and I had to take a history course, a few history courses, just as a general education requirement. And when I was taking one of those courses, I remembered whoa, I forgot I really like history and social sciences. So as I was learning, I realized hey, there's a lot of stuff that I'm being taught at this college level, but I didn't learn at all at the high school or middle school level. And I feel like I really would have benefited from having learned that information a lot younger in life. And I thought to myself oh, it'd be really great if I could be a social science teacher and bring in some of these things that I wasn't exposed to until later in my educational life. So that was kind of my thinking, was I'd like to share more of this knowledge with people at a younger age.
My dream is to be the educator that my students need me to be. And I'm still learning what that actually means. My goal as an educator is to work, heal, and rest into collective liberation. And to me, collective liberation is about a life way that affirms the dignity, wholeness, and wellness of all living beings. What I really mean is a way of living without systems of oppression, domination, and privilege. The Ethnic Studies Residency program has been a major marker in my own healing journey and growth towards that. For example, my mentor teacher at Overfelt, the way that she shows up in the classroom has really given me permission to bring my full self to my role as a teacher. I just get to be me. which is like a very healing thing. And in previous educational experiences, I felt like I needed to like mold myself in a certain way in order to fit the system and just like survive. But like now I'm like in a place where I'm trying to figure out who I really am, and like when no one is looking, and just bringing that self into every space unapologetically. And I also want to say that the program has invited a lot of collaboration with peers who just want to like reimagine and dream and play in ways that really give me hope. And like we don't just talk about what we want to do, like we're actually doing it day in and day out. And so it's like the hopes and the dreaming and the goals, it's like all kind of like into just like one like daily practice. And so it's been really nice.
The Ethnic Studies Residency program has been like such an invaluable experience. Like just the years of experience that the mentors and founders of this program are bringing in, and it's really taught me a lot about like how I want to show up in the classroom, like kind of my disposition that I want to have as a teacher, and the content area too. Like there's such a wealth of like information and history and approaches that having the opportunity to both speak with mentor teachers, speak with my fellow residents, and attend the professional development opportunities. Like I just feel like there's so much that the residency program has to offer.
When I was doing my social science, I guess it would be the classes for social science, there was an ethnic studies class that was also required. And I realized that this was something I would really like to teach, but it's not considered a common core, or sorry, a core, not a common core, but a core class in California public education. So I kind of figured like, oh, if I really want to teach this, it would have to be like probably like at the college level, and I really wanted to work with students that are at either high school or middle school level. So I kind of thought like, oh, okay, it's a shame, that this type of class isn't going to be available for that population. And then going into San Jose State, they mentioned like, oh, by the way, we're offering this ethnic studies residency program. And I applied right away because I was like, yes, this is awesome. Like I have training in these other social sciences, but I'm really excited to go into ethnic studies because it's something that I feel very passionate about, and the program is really preparing me for that.
I think of like transformation or transformative experiences, like it's hard to think of like a moment, but I do think of them as like a collection of moments or something that just like happens over time, and then you can either vision it moving forward, like, oh, this is the transformation I want to see, or you can also reflect on the past and be like, oh, this is the transformations that I am seeing happening right now. And one of the ways that I think that shows up in the classroom is the fact that it's really cool because like I'm doing the learning with my students like every day. So it's not like I'm in the position of like, oh, I know everything and I have all the answers. Like, no, like when I ask students, like we have like these essential questions like, who were you before somebody told you how to be? As a way to start exploring identity. And that's a question that I'm answering, and I'm posing it to students, but I'm also doing the learning with them and the healing that goes in with that. So I think it's like what's transformative about that in the teaching role is that you really have to like let go of your ego in that process to say like, oh, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to do this learning and this work with you.
An experience that's been really transformative has been like hearing students' responses and ideas to what we've been talking about in the classroom. Like 2 examples that come to mind are, we did a unit that focused on Indigenous peoples. And so hearing students' responses, connecting the wealth and knowledge that they have like from their families, from their communities, like bringing that in. And also I think to having the opportunity to hear students, they did group work about the impact on land after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And so hearing what they took away from the reading and their responses, like that was a really cool moment as well.
A really big part of the residency program is that we want to make our approaches very student-centered and also very egalitarian. So one of the things that has been very transformative is unlearning the way that I've learned. So unlearning what we would describe as colonialist education. So trying to unlearn that form of very rigid educational structure. So I feel as though I know that I have a lot to work on, but kind of like opening my eyes to the idea of like, oh, I've trained myself to kind of narrow my ideas, and now I feel like I'm really opening up to what education can be, as not only as a student, but as a teacher. And by learning to be in a way a better student, I feel like it's helping me become a better teacher.
I would say that it's not like I'm trying to teach what I'm learning in the program or, in my classes to people in my social circle, but it's just like these conversations kind of just like organically come up. And so I think that probably has a lot to do with our current political climate, just to put things nicely, if you will. But I think overall people are more open to having, uncomfortable conversations. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like the conversations that I'm having in ethnic studies and in this program, Ethnic Studies Residency program, mirror the conversations that I have with like friends and family too. So learning is always happening.
I think a really valuable takeaway from the program and with ethnic studies is like thinking about like narratives and the perspectives offered. So now I feel like when I interact with like media, if I'm watching something, if I'm reading something, I'm thinking a lot more about like what type of narrative it is, because we talk about like the dominant narrative, like the status quo story as it's always been told. We talk about the counter narrative that kind of challenges that dominant narrative, and we talk about like the absent narrative, so like people and stories who have been like erased throughout history. So I feel like even just that kind of takeaway from the content has made me think so much more about the stories that I'm taking in, and yeah, it's making me think about perspective a lot more.
Within the program, we've learned about a lot of different pedagogies, and one that I've really applied to my own life outside of the program would be culturally sustaining pedagogy. So in a way, I'm applying this to my own life, and I'm really analyzing a lot of my interactions and a lot of my own relationship with my own culture. I'm Mexican American, so that's helped me analyze, where I'm at there, and it's interesting because it has helped me in a way make a connection between myself and my students a bit more, in that we're kind of going through similar processes of being exposed to culturally sustaining pedagogy. And for me, it's something that I've really been able to take home with me and actually discuss with my own family.
Brent and Carrie, the dynamic duo, if you will, of formative assessment, they really deserve a shout out. They were my professors, like they co-taught a class over the summer on formative assessment, and the reason why I want to give them a shout out is because they really shined in terms of like what it means to humanize a virtual classroom and what it means to like have like humanizing teaching practices, especially over the summer with like the racial reckoning happening and the Black Lives Matter movement, and just like how there was a lot going on outside of just like being on a Zoom call. And so I think, you know, they used mindfulness activities. They were really responsive to our needs with their less is more philosophy. And so like they really modeled what it looks like to, one, have like a humanizing practice, but also they modeled what it looks like for two professional, you know, educators to collaborate in the classroom, which is like what we have to do as student teachers with our mentor teachers. So as I reflect, like those two definitely shine the most in terms of my own personal experiences in the program.
Who's really made an impact on me would be Christina Hugo and Heather Schlauman. And Christina Hugo was my supervisor during the fall semester with 184. And so just the level of like feedback, attention to detail, like support, advice, you know, sharing of resources, just how much time and energy and like quality feedback she put into her work was really incredible to see. And it's like the level of support that I hope to give my students. And then I would say Heather Schlauman too. She taught us in the summer, and then she was a thesis advisor. So learning from her about like language and how multilingual students can interact with the school system, and just learning both the research and the policy side of that, but also having her as the advisor in my thesis of like as a thought partner, as someone to talk about these ideas with, talk about how schools are or are not serving students. That was really, really valuable.
One professor that I think I'm going to remember for the rest of my life would be Brett Duker. He would always prefer me to refer to him as Brent as opposed to Professor Duker. So the reason why would be because he introduced us to the concept of centering student voices, and not just having student voices be centered, but kind of guiding and pushing the learning forward, and also putting their experiences into the curriculum and into the lesson. So in a way, building from their prior knowledge, making more connections with what we're learning, but also demonstrating that they have a voice in the class. And that's something that I'm going to remember to always include every single time that I'm teaching, because it's very important for them to know that their connection to what we're learning is just as important as whatever it is that I'm bringing into the room.
This quote from the author of The Body is Not an Apology, Sonia Renee Taylor, stands out to me the most. And so I'll just go ahead and read it and kind of give context as to why I feel like it's relevant. Sonia says, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." And so with that quote, I feel like what I've been able to reflect and gather so far on my personal experience with what 2020 has been to me, I feel like I've become a lot more grounded in what my values are. And so like I'm more aware of like the inner work that like I need to do like on a personal level. But like on an interpersonal level, I am more clear on like what I'm willing to accept, like what my boundaries are, and like what I'm not willing to tolerate, or what I'm not willing to just be patient with. And so I feel like with that reflection, like I'm more clear on like my sense of direction moving forward.
something that I'm learning and that I want to take with me as I'm progressing in my career is really just so much that I've learned from colleagues and through webinars and with abolitionism, and I need to get to the point of like, people are talking about dismantling and reimagining systems because these systems are built on oppression and don't treat people equally and are harmful, are actively harmful. And so I think that's an area that I definitely have a lot of growth in, and that's an area I definitely want to push myself in. I feel like also encouraging students to reimagine and to think about the future they want to see, and the ways that we can challenge these systems, the ways, you know, communities have historically challenged these systems, the ways that like BIPOC women have been the backbone of social movements for change, and yeah, those are just some elements that I hope to take with me.
As far as the impact that this year has had to me, both as a person, a student, and as an educator, is just being a bit more patient and kind, and just in a way humanizing all the different spaces, as well as the connections with our students, because it's very easy to fall into what I would describe as like over professionalism, to where you make everything about business, and there isn't this acknowledgement that we kind of have to like slow down and be mindful, you know, that we're people that are going through a lot of things right now. And whether that's during a pandemic or during a regular academic year, things are happening all the time, and we have to be very conscious of, you know, how frail humanity is, and to remember to be patient, like I said, kind, and I would almost say not necessarily lower your expectations, but make sure that you're supporting your students so that they can be more successful, and acknowledge that, you know, that there's so many different things that are going on at the same time, and to focus more or less on what can be done, as opposed to just pushing for things to get done.
My best piece of advice for future ethnic studies residents is to definitely lean on and take care of the other residents in the program. The other two residents that I collaborate with, we're definitely a tight-knit group. We're just our triad right now, but I definitely wouldn't have gone through the program this far without their support, so I definitely want to give them a shout out. I'm incredibly grateful for all the ways that we've been able to like hold space for each other when things get like really hard, and so yeah, shout out to them.
I would recommend like be open. Like it can be hard because you're being thrown into multiple classes, you're being thrown into student teaching, all these different things, but really like value and cherish like the conversations that you have with people, the community that you're building with people, the advice and the experience and the wisdom that people are bringing in. Like just the amount that I've learned from Julie and Angelica, the amount that I've learned from the Overfelt team, the amount that I've learned like from SJSU folks, being open and really trying to learn is just so valuable. It's pretty amazing to reflect and think back on just like how much all those people have like taught me in what seems like not that long of a time, but also a very long time. And I would say also like prioritize your self-care. There's always going to be work. There's always going to be another thing to do. There's always going to be a demand or an email or whatever. So like in order to sustain yourself, both in this program and in like the career path, of take those breaks, listen to your body, like check in with yourself, and know when to take a break. Definitely have at least one day off so that you can just like be a human and rest as well, because it is a lot of emotional labor and intellectual labor that you are putting in like day in and day out with people. It's very rewarding, but it can also be tiring in those ways. Yeah.
My advice for anybody that's pursuing the Ethnic Studies Residency program would be first to read up on what the I would say the most cornerstone pedagogies that are present in ethnic studies, so you have a better idea of what you are going into. So brush up on that, and then also read the book We Want to Do More Than Survive by Bettina Love. That's a really good text to read. It really helps you connect to what we're doing, and it also opens up your view of education and how transformative you may potentially be, right? In addition to that, I would also say make sure that you come in with a very open mind to collaboration. Ethnic studies is a very community-based field, and I think if it weren't for the other residents in my cohort and for all the mentor teachers and all of the different faculty that is supporting us, if we didn't have their support, I don't know where I would be right now. So make sure that you're ready to go out and reach out to people, because the best thing to do is learn from others.